For a long time, Julie Andrews' name has been associated with sophistication, charisma, and a voice that could calm any crowd. From everyone's perspective, she was picture perfect. The merry nanny who swooped in on an umbrella, the twirling governess who made the Von Trapps happy, and the wise queen who guided a young Mia Thermopolis toward a life of royalty. Underneath that perfect shot, though, lurked a silent storm that the cameras failed to record. Our stars are often elevated on pedestals. Few ever questioned what was happening behind the scenes, because Julie's image was so embedded in our cultural memory, so poised, so clean. However, Julie Andrews' career was never a pipe dream. There were terrible secrets, an enormous amount of responsibility, heartache on a personal level, and a devastating loss that would alter her life irrevocably. Before the hills came alive with the sound of Julie Andrews' voice and the world met Mary Poppins, Julia Wells was simply Julie Andrews. In the midst of total mayhem, a little youngster struggles for survival. Sure thing. Jumping into the section labeled An Unstable Childhood, Hidden Trauma, and a Life on Stage Before Age 10, here we go with the revised script. It leaves room to continue into future portions while maintaining uniqueness, precise detail, and emotional depth. Julie Andrews was a tiny child in post-war England before she won Oscars and graced Broadway stages. Even back then, things were far from usual. She was born Julia Elizabeth Wells into a home where the echoes of instability and terror replaced what should have been the sound of melody. Her mother Barbara had a turbulent personal life despite her talent as a pianist and performer. Julie's biological father, a man whose existence she would learn about much later in life, was barely around during her formative years. In its place, her mother and stepfather, Ted Andrews, whose surname she adopted, raised her in a household where his influence was more hidden than anybody outside the family ever imagined. Ted, a charismatic vaudeville performer, had a big voice and a captivating stage presence. However, when they weren't together, he exhibited emotionally abusive, dominating, and unpredictable behavior. Because she was so afraid, Julie would write in her memoir that she frequently locked herself in a room at night. She even kept quiet about instances of inappropriate behavior for many years. She was too little to understand what was going on, but she knew it made her feel unsafe. But through it all, a dysfunctional family, financial struggles, emotional neglect, Julie's voice was becoming to sound more and more extraordinary, almost supernatural. Her mother first noticed her singing voice at a young age. They subsequently honed their voice skills with the meticulous guidance of Lillian Stiles Allen. I could see it, even in my first classes. This kid singer was extraordinary. Professionals twice her age couldn't match Julie's note-hitting abilities. She was more than just talented, she was a sensation. Before she was even 10 years old, she started playing in music halls all throughout Britain. There were no talent shows or school recitals here. The shows were really riveting. Sometimes in seedy theaters with a smoky atmosphere and jaded vaudeville goers. She began supporting her family through her demanding performance schedules at the tender age of 7, and she was already an earner. What about the stress? Very large. For her, singing was a means of subsistence, not just an asset. There would be enough to eat if she could sing. Ted might have been able to control himself that night if she had managed to reach those unhittable high notes. Her song became her fortress, her shield. A world that seemed profoundly unbalanced, her sole source of stability. This was an adult experience. It was an understated performance, and the pressure would stay with her long after the lights went off. Julie had already dominated the UK stage by the time she was in her late teens. The part offer for the 1954 Broadway debut of the light musical comedy, The Boyfriend, was the actual turning point though. Even though she was a complete stranger to the United States at the age of 19, her skill was obvious. People were enthralled from the very beginning. A 2-year gap later, she earned the most challenging musical theatre role of her career, Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady. Julie did an excellent job displaying the profound emotional range and extraordinary vocal agility that were required. She became indispensable on stage due to her exceptional performance. Hollywood producers ultimately selected to cast Audrey Hepburn in the 1964 film adaptation. They thought Julie lacked the star power necessary for a successful film career. Even worse for Julie, they used a different vocalist to dub over Hepburn's singing. Eliza Doolittle was a role she had invented for herself, but she was still abandoned. This seeming rejection, however, became her destiny because it was none other than Walt Disney himself who was observing her from the wings. Julie Andrews was Walt Disney's sole choice for the role of Mary Poppins after he saw her perform live. No problem, he told her. They could wait when he found out she was pregnant. Then he did it. The fact that Disney took the unusual step of delaying Mary Poppins' production until Julie was ready to star was a testament to their faith in her. The 1964 premiere of Mary Poppins was a watershed moment in popular culture. It was almost effortless for Julie to put up a spellbinding performance. That her debut film performance earned her the Oscar for Best Actress. Not only that, she became an instant superstar all over the world and won a Golden Globe and a BAFTA. Now she was a member of Hollywood's elite, the little girl from Surrey. Her most renowned role, which she portrayed in The Sound of Music, came a year later. In addition to becoming one of the most beloved films of all time, the picture broke box office records and won 5 Oscars. Everyone loved her portrayal of Maria von Trapp because it was so genuine, open, and cheerful, had become a household name thanks to a string of hits. However, she now faced the additional obstacle of meeting the impossible expectations placed on her by the world. Julie was married to Tony Walton, a costume and set designer she had known since they were teenagers, during the heyday of her early success. It seems like everything was going swimmingly for a while after they delivered their daughter Emma. Yet, the burden of celebrity is immense. While Julie was based in Hollywood, Tony was mainly in New York for work. The distance and their demanding schedules drove a wedge between them. They were divorced in 1968, following a relationship of nearly 10 years. Not long after that, Julie crossed paths with filmmaker Blake Edwards, who had previously worked on Victor Victoria and the Pink Panther. He was complex, sardonic, and extremely imaginative. Julie exemplified self-control, kindness, and warmth. They were diametrically opposed on paper, but they balanced each other out in reality. They tied the knot in 1969 and were a couple for more than 40 years. A loving and humorous family was formed as a result of their adoption of 2 girls from Vietnam. As someone who had a hard time learning to laugh at herself due to her upbringing in a very stressful environment, Julie has frequently mentioned that Blake was the one who taught her this. Despite its unconventional nature, their marriage was filled with profound love. Julie referred to him as her rock. She was devastated when Dad passed away in 2010. She told me that my life's light gone out. But she would be rocked to her very core by another loss preceding that one. Julie first felt vocal issues in 1997. As is typical for singers, doctors found non-cancerous nodules on her voice cords. With the expectation of a complete recovery, she had surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. On the contrary, the operation was a complete disaster. She suffered permanent damage to her vocal cords. Her exquisite 4-octave voice, which had become legendary, was disappeared. An identity crisis occurred alongside the professional failure. For Julie, music had always been the means of self-expression. "I fell into a deep despair," she said afterwards. "My voice went out for more than that. Some of my identity was eroded." She sued for malpractice and settled out of court, but the harm was already done. The result was a severely changed voice that she claimed she hardly recognized as her own. The vast majority of individuals would have avoided the limelight long ago. in silence, mourning the passing of their preciousest possession. What about Julie, though? She took a new look at herself. She embarked on a career in children's book, authoring alongside her daughter, Emma. Funny, charming tales that captured the same charisma she had on TV. Their books about fairy princesses sold like hotcakes. Home and Homework, her two autobiographies, provide an unusual and honest look into her life, away from the limelight. Her voice was used for animated parts in Shrek, Despicable Me, and Bridgerton, and she eventually made a triumphant return to the big screen in The Princess Diaries, playing Queen Clarice. Every time, she surprised us with a fresh quality, a subtle grace, an air of royalty, or a mischievous smirk that proved she was still alive and as smart as ever.